It's impromptu, so who shows up, shows up. And with that being said, welcome everyone to. We finally connected and are talking face to face.
So, everyone, this was originally supposed to be my show. This was going to be a Facebook Live where I was joined with Michael and he shares shadow person experience that he had with my own husband. They were doing a show from and then our house, and there was an unexpected visitor. And now we're over on the Weird Walk Home. Hopefully, it's streaming there, anyways. Its own channel, and this is now Michael's show, more or less. But we're happy to be here. We finally got it sorted out. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Michael, I couldn't tell this story without you, my dear. Why don't you set the stage?
All right, and just so the record is straight, it is still Tilly's show. I'm just the hosting platform that we finally were able to connect on. So, just clarifying, I am taking a back seat and not in the hosting seat. And in fact, I'm even going to rotate us so that it looks like that. So, to set the stage, Artemaeus had and I had just wrapped up doing a live episode on my podcast show, and we were just talking and we were kind of like, doing a debriefing, so to speak, of just, how we think it went and, what topics, we were like, should we have covered? Oh, and just kind of doing a little bit of talk. And so there is a part of the story I'm not sure if I can tell, but there was a reason he was on my show first. And so we were discussing that factor and he was like, yeah, this is, it's going to be cool for, future. We'll both be on your show in the future. So I was like kind of a little relieved because I was like, whew, I passed the test, so to speak. But we were just chit chatting and, laughing and cutting up. And I was asking, oh, do you want to schedule, the next episode? And he says, well, Tilly's not here. And so I would have to ask her, about her schedule. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we started talking a little bit more. And I said, oh, she's home. And he goes, no, she's not. I said, oh, there was a shadow that just walked behind you. I thought it was Tilly's shadow. And he says, Tilly's not here. And he says, and there's no way Tilly can walk behind me. It's the couch is up against a fireplace. And so I was like, what? And he's like, where did you see it? And I said, it was off of this shoulder and it was going that way. And I'm trying to get my finger to point. So, and that's, the truth of, being on screen. That's how it was. And he was like, you really saw that? And I said, yeah. And he goes, nobody sees that. How did you see that? I said, it was just, it looked like the top torso of a human walking by. And so I thought, oh, Tilly, walked in front of the light and casted her shadow. But it didn't dawn on me the shadow wasn't on the couch. It was only behind the couch. And so I was, and looking back,
Isn't
I'm
that
like,
interesting?
yeah.
Ooh. Hey, buddy, I'm really, really sorry. I don't know if you can see behind me. We've been trying to troubleshoot for so long. There's a storm rolling in. I have to go get home before I get caught out here in a storm. I hope you can hear me. You're starting to glitch out. Give me like 10 minutes to get home and get set up. and we can do this again. I'm so sorry. If you can just hold the stream, talk for a few minutes, let me go take care of that, and I will be back, okay?
Yeah, we got
If
you.
you're able to do that. If not, I totally understand. It wasn't even supposed to rain today.
I can do that. Just I'll leave it open. You go get home, get safe, and get out of the
Yeah,
storm. And
it's
you,
just it's a it's
I
a
was gonna say
short
I'll
walk.
leave it open.
Yeah, please do. It's a short walk. I'm hearing thunder and the clouds are all here and I really shouldn't mess around with that.
No, it's not good to be in the water during a storm with lightning, especially with electronics.
Uh yeah. Well, I can walk with you a bit here. People can just kind of hear me chatter, but I've never had this much difficulty in getting a video or a live stream set up ever. I've never had this much trouble before.
I
And it makes
know.
me wonder what's going on. Um, Buddy, why don't you explain some of the issues that we had in getting this set up?
Yeah, I'll gladly do that.
Yeah.
So Tilly does really great lives. I dub them poolside chats where she's in the nice comfort of a pool. Gotta admit, a little jealous about that.
Oh,
And she tells her story and explains and interacts with the people who chime in on the live. And it's a lot of fun to watch. And she shares a lot of great information. And just FYI, I am not getting paid to plug Tilly. So
thank you.
this is all coming from the heart. But she is an amazing wealth of information, a great author, and a lot of fun to talk with. And so we have a great friendship behind the scenes that comes through on screen as well. But yeah, so we're not just two people that are getting together, collaborating to go, oh, we're doing this or this to just to do this. No, we are truly friends, and we're
Yes.
doing this to collaborate and support each other. And that's something worth noting. And so when she was live, I am in her chat room at times when I can make it. Well, we tried to get me on the live stream, and for some reason my account won't access the live and as a participant. So we tried figuring that out, troubleshooting it,
For
trying
over
on
an
cell
hour.
phone. Yeah, I was doing cell phone updates. I was trying on cell phone. I was trying on a laptop, the web browser. I was trying on the physical app on the computer. Nothing would allow us to connect because it'll say, join live, and that button does not appear on my screen nor on her screen for me, which is kind of odd because she could add other people. So I tried going live and I had no button to add anybody. And so it makes me wonder, somehow either somewhere buried deep in Facebook land, there is a setting that does not allow me to do lives that's checked, or I just, for some reason, my account, it may be also that it's a personal account and not a public page, and so maybe the public pages are the only ones that can join lives and collaborate, like the professional level stuff. But
Oh, yeah,
needless to
that's a good
say,
point.
we finally gave up on that, went to try YouTube. Well, YouTube, I could do a live, but there was no way to add anyone to collaborate with and be on screen at the same time. And so I shut it down when a friend advised me to talk to somebody about doing it. I was like, I'll look at that later because right
Yeah.
now we're trying to get this story out and we told you all it would be today. So we are like, clock is ticking. We got to keep our word. We got to keep our integrity because that's important to both of us. And we said
Yeah.
we would do this. And so that's where we are right now is we finally decided even after Zoom we couldn't figure out
I know,
live
which is
streaming.
it's so weird too because my Zoom would not allow me to log in either. I don't know if ooh, excuse me, if we just glitch day for a lot of these platforms, but my
I think because she's walking outside, the internet is cutting in and out. So
oh, here it is.
well,
Are you still there?
yeah, we're here. We can hear you. There
Okay.
you are.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I got back to my house and the Wi-Fi picked up again. At least that allegedly should make it a lot smoother for us.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, it's not even supposed to rain here today, which is part of why I picked today. And now I mean you can't see it all, but there's a thunderstorm rolling in. And it's just
And
been
the
one thing after the other after the other.
well, the funny thing is I'm looking outside and there's a thunderstorm rolling in where I am too.
Oh wow. Okay. So it's not just me.
No,
Oh my
but
goodness.
the funny thing is like she was saying the Zoom wouldn't allow her to log in. I had messaged her when I went to Zoom Workplace, I could get in and I was logged in. But if I went to Zoom Direct and was like, "Hey, I just want to do this," it would open up, but then when I said sign in so I could get a longer than 40-minute Zoom, it would just spin. It was like, "Nope." And so she finally, I will admit, Philly had a spark of genius and said, "Can you go live on StreamYard?" And I said, "Actually, yes, I can." So I went and quickly set up this StreamYard link and set up some links to go to a few platforms where I know you all chime in and, chat with us. And so we have Jason in the chat room right now saying hello to everybody.
Hey,
And thank you, Jason, for saying another fantastic live because this
we're
live
trying.
this live was kind of spontaneous. I'm not even going to attempt to say that word right now because it's not coming to me. It was spur of the moment. I'll put it that way because we had originally intended another way. So we are grateful that you all are here tuning in. And if you are on my Facebook page, just know that I am working on right now going to my Facebook page. So if you are commenting, I will be able to see those comments, but even I have to figure out where the live is on my app because oh, here it is. Just found it.
Nice. All right, I gotta change out of my wet swimsuit real quick. I can still hear you. I can still chat. I'm just gonna be off of camera for a second, okay?
Yes, please do that off camera.
Yeah, yeah, no joke. You can look at my ceiling.
It's a very lovely ceiling.
It is, isn't it? That's my ceiling.
And look at the nice, fan with the really nice blades, spinning fast.
Right?
Got that Art Deco fan going.
Art Deco. Yeah, that's true. It's original. It came with the condo.
Hey, you can't beat that.
Uh, It's a really nice place, though. We love where we're at now, and it is truly a blessing in a lot of ways to live in Florida.
Yes, and so while Tilly's getting ready, I am going to take a moment to say again for those that are just joining us, because we have announced where we were going to be several times over, and chances are a lot of you are probably just now tuning in that were watching us before. So I am going to state again what today's topic of the live talk with Tilly Treadwell is. And yes, I said I wasn't going to be in the host seat, but circumstances being what they are, I am temporarily taking the host seat. Tilly is talking to me about when we had done a live show with Artemaeus and I. We were debriefing and talking after the show about future shows and, working together and, stuff about our lives, kind of getting to know each other a little bit more off the live because we had so much fun talking on the live. And I had mentioned to Artemaeus about Tilly coming on, and he said she's not home right now, so he'll have to ask her when she gets home. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And so we started talking a little bit more. And I go, oh, Tilly's home. And he goes, I beg your pardon? I said, I just saw a shadow of a person walk by. And he goes, where? And I'm going to point on the screen because it'll match the story that we had. And it was over this shoulder walking towards that direction off screen. Mind you, he was further over and it was a much bigger screen, so there was more space, but I'd literally watched it walk from his shoulder to off the screen. And I go, oh, Tilly's back. And he goes, no, she's not. And I said, I just saw a shadow walk over your shoulder off the screen. And he's like, you actually saw that? And I was like, yes, I actually saw this shadow. And I was so wishing we were recording this part of the, after show, because I don't record the after show debriefs, but if we were, we would have it on film. But unfortunately, as they all strike when the cameras are off. So he was surprised that I actually saw this figure. And as he was sitting on the couch, I said, it was behind you. So, I figured she was passing in front of the light and the shadow went by. And he goes, well, one, there's no room to walk between the couch and the fireplace. And I was like, oh. And I was telling Tilly, I didn't notice until when I think about it now, the shadow was only the upper torso and up, like the head. I didn't see any legs or anything, and it wasn't casting on the sofa. It was literally like the shadow was walking behind the sofa. And so that was like another, interesting twist to it because, like Artemaeus said, there's no way to walk there. So no human could be there. But yet, it's interesting that the shadow decided to walk there in that moment and not cast its shadow on the sofa just behind. And so it's like, yeah, and we both were like, what? And I think, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, Tilly, but when you finally made it home, Artemaeus was like, yeah, I'm talking to Michael. And I think like his first statement was, I don't think you're not gonna believe what happened. And it was like there was no like, "Hey, welcome back. Hey,
Right. Yeah.
we did this or that." It was like he jumped right into Michael saw this.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. And I was a little, oh, here's my stand. I was a little bit surprised to hear about it because my shadow people friends, they don't tend to show themselves too terribly often to outsiders, and for whatever reason, they chose, or that person chose, to interact with you. And we've often thought about putting up cameras to record all of what happens here, but a lot of them don't want to be recorded, and they're not shy about letting us know that. Um, I've got my stand here. I'm gonna hop in bed real quick on my stand. I'll be right back with you.
No worries. So, yeah, and so, as paranormal investigators, we see things and, we, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt and we have to, work on figuring out, what is truly paranormal, what isn't, what could have happened, what couldn't have. But this is one of those rare moments that was caught with the eye alone going, there's only one person in the house. He's sitting on the couch. I know Tilly and Artemaeus, wouldn't, play a joke and like, oh, we have a third person here and have them do something and be like, ha ha ha. That's just not who we are. We're the type of people that are like, what you see really happens, and we're believers of you don't need to fake the material because the material itself is cool enough. So that's where I'm like, as the paranormal investigator to me, I was like, I can't explain this shadow at all because all the normal parameters that would cause a shadow to be cast were not present. And so it's like literally no rhyme or reason. And the casual way that it was walking off, it's like it wasn't, it was more like it was just saying, hey, we're here. And was like, that's it. That's all we want to do. And they never showed themselves again that night. But it was like, it was just funny because it was like, it just casually walked off the screen. It was like, hey, if you see me, cool. If you don't, whatever. I'm just chilling here. I'm just gonna go check out over here now.
Yeah, yeah, that happens a lot too with other people who have reported incidences surrounding Artemaeus and I. A lot of people have these really dramatic encounters with non-human beings, non-human people, but for us, it's just our everyday. It's my everyday, and sometimes that will shed or leak into other people's lives as you yourself um, experienced. And I was delighted actually that one of them decided to show up for the two of you, and that I was not there. I couldn't be accused of any kind of fakery, and especially with what you were describing. Um, I've taught Artemaeus a lot about paranormal investigation, about esoteric exorcism, and non-human psychology and whatnot. So he was able to talk with you and help suss out what you were saying. For people who had caught the bit of a live that I did earlier, I was talking about some ways that I would assess a shadow person scenario back when I was working active cases with the Catholic Church, and then even after that. I still use a lot of these methods to this day. And one of them is to talk with the the alleged victim or the alleged witness about the physics of it. So in Michael's case, there wasn't enough room behind the couch for anyone to be walking. The shadow was only a half shadow, and it didn't cast any shadow on Artemaeus or on the furniture around. And then um, it
It never
it had a certain,
acknowledged us.
yeah, it wasn't there interacting like a person. It was very casual, and that's something that really stands out to me as an investigator, because a lot of people do believe that almost every single shadow person event is somehow dramatic or chaotic or traumatizing or negative, and that's not been my experience at all, for the vast most part anyways. And I was talking about some of the science behind that, that in my experience anyway, some of the shadow people, quote unquote, that we see are just literal shadows being cast from another dimension. And some of them are actually non-human peoples who are manifesting here in this reality. And so they have more depth, they have more weight to their bodies and whatnot. And those types of apparitions interact with the physical environment in a completely different manner than just a regular old shadow. And when Artemis was talking with you about your encounter, everything that you said lined up with precisely all of the other types of events that I've encountered of this type, and it lines up with the known physics, quantum and otherwise, that investigators would typically expect to see during an encounter of this nature. So to me, what you were saying is perfectly credible, and lots of other people have come back and reported to me like, hey, I started working with you, and then I've started having these other types of events happen around my own house or my own workplace, or you'll never believe this synchronicity. And so I find that fascinating. I'm so grateful that you're here to chat with us about that. Had you ever seen anything like this before?
So I was just about to tell you my experience was with shadow beings when I was growing up. Is when I would see them more. Is they would be in the corner of the eye, and when you look directly at them, it's like the energy dispersed. It's like, nope, we're not looking at you direct. But the interesting thing too is they seem to, in my childhood, appear in a dark hallway, come through the doorway, come towards, but there's light on. But the second I look at them, they disperse. So when I was talking with Artemaeus, there were lights on. I mean, there was no dark spots in the room. And so it was really interesting to me that it started right behind him because I could still see, he was like this on the corner. So you can still see some of the background on this side. And it started over here and walked off. And yes, the screen was bigger because, I had a bigger box on the screen, but it was interesting to me that I'm looking directly at this shadow being, for lack of a better term, but it never dispersed. It's like, how am I looking directly at you, but you're staying in form until you got off the camera?
Yeah, that's another anomaly that people have described when visiting with me and with Artemis, especially on our own turf. Um, we don't tend to have people over too much anymore, to be honest, because sometimes people are not ready for who and what they encounter. But say, for example, if you were to come over, you might start seeing some of the things and the peoples that we see. And um, a common tale that we've heard from people is that sometimes they will see a complete shadow shape in one form or another, not in the periphery, but right in plain vision, and it doesn't disperse. It'll walk into a wall or float into a piece of furniture or turn a corner and then be gone, but it's not like how a lot of people experience them, where they'll disperse or they'll just seem to evaporate. So these are, in a lot of ways, fully formed non-human visitors that have enough energy here in our home, for whatever reason, to completely manifest and then interact in the environment with us. And shameless self plug, my friends, I do talk a little bit about this type of phenomenon in my brand new book, Tilly Treadwell's Enchanted Objects, that's available over on Amazon. And I talk about some of this phenomenon from the inside, including cutting edge science as well, material sciences, quantum sciences. And you might want to check that out too as a companion piece to this live that we're having here. But yeah, Michael, do you have anything to add or ask on that topic? The fully formed peoples and beings and whatnot?
Well, I would add that I was on another investigation, and it was not, with Tilly or Artemaeus, and it was dark, and we were seeing like a shadow forming in a hallway,
Mm.
and a friend and I were like, we're watching this, and we're like, I'm hoping I'm getting it on camera, and my friend's like, oh, you won't get this on camera because you don't have the right kind of camera. It's a very specific camera that will pick these up. And I was like, oh, well, that's good to know. I thought that's what the body cams were for. But we were, we made the mistake of, with like, the rest of the team was further in the room going, oh, there's a shadow forming here. And they all shine their lights into the door frame to go, where? And I was
Yeah.
like, nowhere now. You guys dispersed it, and it turned to poof and disappeared. And so I was like, oh. And so that's been my experiences with the shadows is, any light source
Mhm.
causes them to disappear. And so I just wanted to throw that out there too of, the fact, like I pointed out, all the lights were on. But the other thing that I wanted to add about it was when I said to Artemaeus, when he was, I think I let him finish what he was saying, and it wasn't that long. I was like, "Did you see the shot that, that? Oh, Tilly's back because the shadow." When I mentioned it to him, he was like, "What did you see? Where?" It was like he was like genuinely confused and was like, "What's going on?" And so I could tell by his facial expression, yeah, he didn't set the stage for something to happen. And besides that, if personally, I'm of the opinion, and you all can chime in and tell me if I'm wrong or not. But if I'm going to go through the trouble of making something appear so that somebody else sees something and it's like, ooh, and hype up something, to go, oh, I'm going to do it while the live stream is on, not when the live stream is off and just talking to talk. I'm like, because you missed your golden opportunity. So that's, the other thing, of pointing out is, he was genuinely shocked, and there were no, the record button had already stopped. It was not like, oh, let me get it in at the last second, and oh, the timing was off. I mean, we had been offline, meaning we're not live, recording for probably a good 5 minutes, probably or so. But it was enough time to where it was like, yeah, you couldn't mistakenly say, oh, trying to sneak something in at the last second. It was like everything of what you would think somebody is doing to fake something, just it wasn't lining up because all those factors were voided because, yeah, the moment had passed. We had like an hour and a half of nothing, and then it happens after, and it's like, yeah, he had plenty of time to do something. So that's the other part of the story that I like to add in, is to go, for sure, Artemis and Tilly are not foolish people to go, oh, now's our moment. And it's like, no, the moment had passed, but okay, they're not going to slip up and, be like, oh, we thought we were still recording and did this. Nope, not those kind of people. So
Mhm.
we're all smart, intelligent people, and we're all credible and integrity driven individuals. So it was no shenanigans going on behind the scenes and no missed opportunities. It was like a moment of looking into their world through the lens just for my benefit, so to speak, is what it felt like.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah, there have been other people, I'll tell a few stories here in a moment, who have said the same thing, that they're grateful to have met me and get to know my world because some people get to really experience some events and meet some types of peoples that otherwise they never would have. And I don't choose who my friends and companions interact with. So whoever they choose on their own, it's a blessing, or depending on who you are, it could be a curse. I've gotten some really bad stories back too from people that I no longer associate with who, maybe my friends and my companions think did me kind of dirty. And so there are both sides of that coin there, and I'm happy to share some examples of both. But that's really what it's like living in an inhabited house. It's a mixed bag of personalities and a mixed bag of agendas and motives and whatnot. They love me, they absolutely adore me, and they do everything that they can to help and protect me and um, to assist me in navigating this lifetime. But each of them has a unique personality. They have their own unique agenda and boundaries and preferences and whatnot. And I have a working and loving relationship with all of them, but I can't control what it is that they do with each other human element that I introduce into my sphere. And that's something that Artemaeus had to learn over years as well, because he had many different um, encounters with many different types of my non-human friends and companions, and they really did not like him for many years because of how he treated me. And Michael, you know our backstory.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah. That's why I'm
yeah,
kind of like smiling and laughing as I'm like,
yeah,
oh, yeah, I know this story. But
yeah. So for
I
anyone who
just
may
had
not,
a thought pop in my head too and I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize.
that's okay. Please.
But we're talking about how it's like the protection and everything, and choosing this and that, and I can't help thinking now. It's like as Artemaeus and I were talking, it's like, yes, I'm talking this way about these things, and it's like they're like, huh, is he really like that? And so it's like they were like, oh, let's do this and see how he reacts.
Yeah.
And it was like a test of them saying to you, yeah, he's this is how he reacted to this. Okay, he is who he says he is, or as I didn't go, oh, we gotta do this, and we gotta do a video to show this, and we could totally get this on TV and do this and that. And it's like, no, my reaction was, wow, that's really cool that I was able to see that and kind of just let it go and was like, okay. And
Yeah,
so I think they kind of were like, hey, this person's different.
I completely agree with you, and that's a big thing in non-human psychology. At least in my experience, they like to lay out tests, and in some ways, it can be a treat or it can be a trap. It really just depends on the human element. And when I had started working with you, there were a few of them that had approached me about you specifically, saying that they really liked what you were pointing out. They liked how you were treating me and whatnot. And I said, that's good because I like it too. I'm getting good vibes, quote unquote, from him, and I'd like to continue. And then meanwhile, there are other people that they tell me, okay, this person, they have some healthy things for you or not, and they evaluate each person that comes into my circle essentially, and they give me advice, they give me tips and feedback. And that's how my relationship started with Artemaeus. A non-human guardian of his family came to me and told me, like, if you get involved in this relationship, it's not mandatory for your lifetime, but there are going to be massive benefits down the road if you can make it through. But generally, here is what his family would make of you. Here is their psychological profiles. It's going to be extremely dangerous and extremely difficult for you because it will be full of abuse and neglect, and they won't like you for many years because of your differences. But if you can make it, this is what's going to happen later on down the road. And me, I thought, okay, I'll take it on. I mean, that's what I'm here for, I guess, in this lifetime, so why not? And oh boy, have I really regretted it until recently. But that said, I'm not surprised at all what you're telling me, and it does very much sound exactly like something that one of my non-human companions would do as a character test. You know what I mean? And
Right.
Artemaeus now, he is he's no longer in the doghouse with them. He had some terrifying encounters with them when I finally stopped pleading with them to treat Artemaeus and those who were mistreating me with kindness. I love to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and I used to believe that people were doing their best and they really were trying to be kind people. It's not the case. And anyone who says that is either very innocent and naive, or they are enabling abusive people. And so once my non-human friends and companions got involved with the relationship with Artemaeus and I, they gave him back all of the karma that he was due for hurting me and then some. But as he did proceed on his path of healing and um personal transformation, he had that divine discipline put onto him, and it really did help him to transform. They started to give him more and more little tests, like what you were describing, and to help acclimate him to the type of life that I live. And eventually, he was passing those tests with flying colors, and now he's used to it. If he sees a mimic in the hallway, or if he wakes up to someone who, quote unquote, shouldn't be there, if he sees a shadow person or a mist, or if he were to meet a small cryptid in the house, he's not he's not at all offended by it or upset by it. He doesn't think it's evil or is out to eat him or anything of that nature, and he doesn't try to exploit it. You know what I mean? He
Right.
understands the psychological boundaries, and we have a really nice working, living, loving flow, all of us together. And I think what happened with you, it makes me really happy because it means that they were inviting you in. I mean, you haven't had any bad luck or anything since then, right?
Not that I would attribute to them, no, or to meeting you, but I kind of feel like now, though, it's interesting, as we're talking about this, how the whole thing unfolded, just, and if, I'll leave some of the details out, but you and I were talking on Messenger for a long time, and then it got quiet, and I was like, okay, and I'm one of those that, if conversation stops, I don't, like jump on and be like, oh my God, why'd you stop talking to me? I'm like, okay, things are going on. Person's busy. Just, give them space and, connect when, connect. And it was like probably like a couple of months, and then I was like, "Oh, hey, we were talking about, possibly doing an episode." And you're like, "Oh, I'm not doing that now. I need to go, it's now being done this way." And so I was like, "Okay." And I felt like part of me felt like, is this a test? Like, the way you were
Mhm.
wording it, I was like, is this a test to see, what's gonna happen on the episode, or what's going on? Because the way it was like is she's like, you have to do it this way if that's okay with you, and I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And it's like I feel like I kind of surprised you because you were like, oh, okay, well then, yeah, I'll put him in touch with you. And then he and I did the episode much later, and then we, talked. This experience happened. Tilly and I would talk a little bit more than behind the scenes like we were before the break or the silence happened, and figured out what was going on. And I was like, okay, I respect that. That happens. And so I think I even was like, kudos to you for, doing that, and, stepping back and doing what you needed to do. And then we started talking, and then I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to be, and then at the timeline, if I remember right, is you then came on the show and we did our episode, and then we met actually at the conference. And what was funny is at the conference, we, were like talking, and you would think we'd known each other for a long, long time. But in reality, it was like probably less than a year.
Mhm.
But there were certain things that you and I had talked about in the early days before the break, of communication. And I feel like what was interesting is as we're, going through the conference, little pieces of what you had told me started like flashing in my mind as I'm watching this scenario unfold. And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I start reacting.
Yeah.
And Tilly and Artemaeus are like, how did you know to do that? How, what, how, thank you so much for doing that. And it was like, yeah, nobody asked me to do it. It's like just something triggered in me. And it was like, okay, this is this mode. This is this mode. We got to do
Yeah.
this. We got to do this. And it was like kind of funny to watch. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's like, yeah, I think I was having flashes of the conversation going and saying, hey, look, this is what's about to happen. Here's what she said about this. What are you going to do? And so I'm wondering now in this moment, going where your guys putting these conversations in my head to go, here's another test. Are you, going to react according to the information, or are you going to let the scenario happen and be like, oh, sorry, I should have done this? And so I think it kind of surprised them too that I was like, went right into before they even finished the scenario, going, oh, he's already doing it.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe, I mean, I had nothing to do with that. There's only so much that I can orchestrate, but maybe you were tapping into some of the guardians that I have on the other side, and they were helping you to navigate some of those situations because you were honestly put in some pretty novel, maybe even in some ways very intimidating situations being my own companion at that conference. And I don't think you could have handled that any better than you did. And I'm always going to be forever grateful to know you, to have you in my life, even if only for that moment in time. And I'm thoroughly impressed. And for them even to show up to you in any way, shape, or form, there's no way to, in my mind, that that's a coincidence. You know what I mean? Because not
Right.
everyone gets a visit, especially not on camera.
Right. And I think it's also interesting that, now that I'm thinking about them being in my mind in those moments after, it's like from everything I've been told from people that are in like the metaphysical community of if you can think it, you can dream it, it really is. And so my mind is going, since I'm thinking that's what they were doing, it really was them doing that. And so it goes to show, even though conversation wise, I got the okay, being on the show, got the okay, got the visual test okayed in between, that they were like, we're still going to make sure. Oh, nope, we got that okay too. So it's like, they're still checking things, and so it's kind of an interesting facet to think about of, even if you have the okay, you can't hang your laurels on I got the okay. It's You're gonna constantly be, they're gonna sneak it in on you and be like, oh, are you less resting on your laurels, so to speak, and have your guard down thinking we already approved you, so you don't have to do anything. Now you're gonna really
Yeah.
show who you are, versus, oh, we tried to, throw him off his game, but he genuinely can't be thrown off his game because he is who he is.
Yeah, I think you've got a point there, and that lines up with what they've told me too. And as I was talking about earlier in the streams that I was trying to attempt, I do a lot of work behind the scenes with psychologists, geneticists, and quantum scientists, physics scientists. There's a lot of people that I work with, a lot of stuff that I can't talk about publicly yet, but maybe that'll change in a few years. I don't know yet. Um, Regardless, all of my evaluations come back saying that I'm a very sweet, innocent person by nature. And that's something that my non-human friends and companions they're just always on me about it. They're like, you can't take a person's um especially like a person who is higher in ego content and higher in emotional content. You cannot look at them as being like us. We are stable and consistent through time, but human people especially have lots and lots of feelings and ego highs and ego lows and completely different needs than what um, we non-human people would have, than what you're used to. And that's something that I've talked about at length with psychological specialists who work with me behind the curtain. And so I've had to learn how to continuously evaluate someone for their motives and their personality and things of that nature, because it does not come naturally to me. So all of that to say, with what you're saying, it lines up with what my non-human friends and companions have told me about how they work and how they feel like they have to work in this society. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if what you said is true. Did it scare you or anything? How did you feel about all of this?
It didn't actually, to be honest, to me, it felt like normalcy every
Mm,
step of the way. Like, yeah, this is just normal. I go through this all the time, and it's like,
okay.
I see something. If I don't, I don't. And, you know, I keep I used to think about, oh, I want to be on, the TV shows. When I first started paranormal investing, I was like, how cool would it be to be on a show? Well, then I started looking at the shows and everything. And as I got deeper into it, I was like, yeah, I don't think I could do the shows because I don't have the capability of turning a corner and going, oh my God, did you see that? Or, oh my God, did you hear that? If I didn't see or hear anything, it's like I
Mhm.
can't just throw it out there and be like, did I hit my cue right? Did I, put enough emotion behind it to get the intent across of what you wanted, Mr. Producer or Director? And I was like, I don't have that actor part to it in me anymore. And I know it sounds strange because I am theatrically trained, and there's a reason why I don't share that part of my life very often because I feel like, you know, anybody that hears, oh, he's, been trained as an actor. He did acting growing up. Oh, well, now, that throws into question everything he does and says. And I didn't want that stigma. And so I, wasn't sharing it. And then I met a friend of mine, Heidi Pop, and we were talking about theater and how much fun it was and, shows. And we were just, having so much fun. I was like, you know what? I feel like in my life now, where I am versus where I was when I started, if now, I would say I have no problem saying I had theater background because my integrity and my personal self has been, as they would say in medieval times, weighed and measured. And, the conclusion is what the conclusion is. When I first got started, nobody knows me to measure and weigh the true me. So it could have gone a bad way. So now it's like if you want to come at me and say, well, you're an actor, you know, I can't believe anything you say. I'm like, well, that's, too bad for you. Cause I have all these friends that, they know me and they'll vouch for me in a heartbeat saying, yeah, he doesn't act on camera at an investigation or he doesn't act on his shows or when he's talking to people, he is who he is. And
Sure.
it's like, and so it's interesting, how we think we all know each other because of how we interact and talk, but we all have those little few, as they call, like skeletons or mythos and mystique in the background that we keep, until it's like, yeah, now's the right time to bring it up and share it.
Mhm. Sure.
Be and so yeah, and so do I get nervous being tested? If I knew I was being tested, I would be totally in my head and going, "Oh my god,
Mhm.
what's the actual test? How do I got to prepare? I got to do that. And I would get really mental about it.
Aw.
Whereas if they just do it, it's more the genuine me because I don't have the time to get the mental games going and going,
Yeah.
is this the right answer? Is this the right answer? Is this the right act? Oh my God, what if I do this and this goes wrong? What's going to happen now? And it's like, yeah, you can spiral really quick over some of these tests. And I've gone to locations to where I know I've been tested and measured and to see, am I who I really am? And had, things shown to me. Like I have physically witnessed apparitions, shadow beings, shapeshifters, movement of objects that in normal science it's impossible for them to move. And yet I came out of it like, dude, I can't believe we had lost time. That was like the big concern was like, oh my God, I thought we were in there for an hour. We were in there for 3 hours. I gotta go because I gotta, get some sleep because I gotta get up in the morning. It's like it didn't phase me at all. But I feel like yeah, if I went in there, knowing what was coming, it probably would have phased me a whole lot differently, and I would have been like coming out of it, go, how did I do? Did I pass? Did I pass? Did I do this right? Did I do that right? Should I have done this? Should I have done that? And they would have been like, dude, chill. It's over.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that they talk to me about a lot. That if they're going to test a human heart, they would do it as organically as possible. It would be embedded into that human being's personal life somehow or into their work life to see how they would react on the fly. It wouldn't be a test that would be announced. And they'd often use third parties to do so, human or otherwise, and then evaluate the human person based on how that person treats the third party or how they respond to the situation, how they feel about the situation at hand. They're looking for the like avoidance, dishonesty. They're looking for delusion, mental illness. Those things all weigh how a person scores on a test one way or another. And, whether or not someone does something harmful purposefully or not, that also apparently is huge on their karma list. And um, they kind of explained to me that this is how things are written in, for example, the Egyptian Book of the Dead with Anubis weighing a person's heart, that the person's heart has to be as light as a feather. There are many ways to say it, but that's essentially what they're looking for. And there are a lot of opportunities for them to interact with and to test human hearts, and they'll take advantage of that in a multitude of ways. And so apparently this is how they choose people to interact with, and then whether that's going to be positive, negative for the human being, um, it all just depends on who that person is, who that human being is at a core level. And this is where we get into maybe some Gnosticism and related esotericism, because many people here believe that demons, angels, excuse me, fairies, for example, are all completely different categories. But in my understanding and in my personal experience, a lot of the time they're actually one and the same, and they'll switch out ego masks depending on the human person that they're interacting with. So, for example, you yourself, you had a very neutral, maybe even kind of a cool, positive encounter with one of my companions, but maybe that companion is interacting with Artemaeus, Artemaeus, the person that he is now. He's gone to years of therapy. He's been through years and years of exposure to me and how I think and how I live, and years of dealing with, my non-human friends and companions. That same shadow person might offer Artemaeus inspiration or help, um, or something of that nature. But that same shadow person interacting with Artemaeus, who Artemaeus used to be, was probably one of the people taking out karma on Artemaeus, making his life a living hell. But who is that shadow person? You could classify that shadow person perhaps as an angel, as a demon, as a fairy, as a jinn, any number of things, but it's still the same concept, if that makes sense. It's a non-human person at the core interacting with humankind that is somehow permitted by quote unquote God. Because without God, none of us would be here, at least in my understanding and in my theory. So I believe that all of us are divine beings in one way, shape, or form because we all contain that creative spark at the heart. Does that all make sense, or am I just talking gibberish?
No, it does, and I have two examples to back it up actually. And
Awesome.
I was talking last night with a guest, and somehow we got, we were like, we're not going on to, a religious rant,
Mhm.
but, and I was like, yeah, you know, But here's something, that's interesting because, we're talking about bringing the divinity of the self back. And you need the divine masculine and divine feminine both in the individual. And so I'm like, yeah, we need to bring this back. But it's interesting to me that when you look at, religion, and we were looking at the Catholics at this point, I was
Mhm.
like, in the book, it says in the beginning, we're all made in God's image. So we're all the sons and daughters of God. Then somewhere throughout history, it becomes only Jesus is the child of God. We are no longer
Mhm.
the child of God. And I was like, wait a minute, hold the phone. I did not sign off my divinity.
Yeah, yeah.
Who of you had the right to sign off my divinity? No, no, no. That's not right. That's not cool. And so that's where we were going with it is, we were, and then somehow we were told we weren't. And everybody just was like, okay, so we're not. And it's like, no, I don't just accept that. It's like, no, I am divine. I have not given that right up. I have not given up that birthright. And nobody is taking that birthright from me. And that's what people, I think, need to do, and that's what people are doing now. And when we say, become your, sovereign, your, whole self, and everything, that's what we're talking about is realizing your divinity and your role. And by, and just to clarify, because I know some people, hear the word divine and go, oh, angel or God, you're a God. And it's like, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying you're owning your existence. You are who you are. And it doesn't make us gods. It doesn't make us angels. It doesn't make us anything but who we are. And that's the important thing. And oh, I should have led with the other thing because now I completely forgot what the other
Oh,
thing you
no!
said was. Oh, I remember now. Looking at, you know me, I like my movie references.
Yeah.
So as you were explaining, how your non-human friends interact with others, the vision I was getting was the crucible of The Empire Strikes Back on Dagobah, where he goes
Mhm.
into the tree and he says to Master Yoda, what do you mean I can't take my lightsaber in there? Or I can't take my blaster in there? He
Yeah.
goes, you're only taking yourself in there. Well,
Mhm.
what am I going to find in there? Only what you take with you. And it's like, and so that's what it is they enter he enters the tree and he's afraid of Vader. So Vader appears.
Uh-huh.
So the visual for you is, the interactions with the non-humans, it's like they're inside the tree waiting, and whoever comes and enters the tree, they're going to show them exactly what those people brought in and be like, yeah. And I think that's why everybody's experience is different because
Yes.
everybody brings difference.
Yes. Absolutely. I completely agree with that, and I love that that's actually represented somewhere in, media. I had no idea. I've never seen the Star Wars movie or Star Trek of anything of that nature, but yeah, that's exactly it, and that is what these non-human people have told me since I was a young child. And that's something too that keeps coming up time and time again with them. They are always telling me whether they're presenting as angels, demons, fairies, elementals, cryptids, anything of that. They're always telling me that all of these different sides love me because I'm what they call pure of heart. You know what I mean? So I'm very innocent and naive, which has led me to lots of earthly troubles. But that's what they say that they love me for. And so even the so-called demons have often supported me in my journey. They've given me priceless information. They've handled business for me that's been too difficult for me to even be able to touch because they love and respect me that much. And it's not that I've gone out of my way to work with, quote unquote demons who want to destroy humanity. It's that all non-human people, in my understanding and experience, present as reflections of whoever is in front of them. And so the purer of heart someone is, the more accurate and honest and just in general loving someone is, the more the non-human people will treat that person with complete respect, no matter what quote unquote side they're on. This reminds me, have you ever heard of the movie Bedazzled from
I have.
2008? Yes, that is one of my most favorite movies ever, especially when it comes to esoteric and paranormal non-human matters and relationships. Not to spoil too much of the movie for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. However,
I
it's really
think it's
important.
safe to say, Tilly, you can not put a spoiler alert out. That movie has been out so long
Forever.
that unless you're under a rock, yeah, you deserve at this point to have the spoil alert.
Okay, well, in that case, I'll spoil it. The devil and the so-called God are working together in tandem to help the subject of the movie grow and mature his spirit throughout the movie. He thinks that he's signing a contract with the devil, but it actually turns out that the devil and God are working together. And they actually show this towards the end of the movie, where God and the quote unquote devil are sitting down together playing chess with each other and talking about what a journey the main character had been on. And it's made very clear that even though it appears that they are complete opposites, they're actually very good friends and they work together extremely closely. And this has always been my experience with non human peoples. So that's something of a message that I like to get out there as much as I can. I promote the idea of shadow work, lots and lots of deep shadow work, especially for people who have really high ego content and really high emotional content. And you'd know this because someone is very fearful. They might have a lot of anxiety. They may have a suspected or a diagnosed personality disorder, which that may be a topic for another day, but it's not hopeless if someone is diagnosed with some type of personality disorder. Maybe we can get into that some other time. Addictions, addictions to alcoholism, to drugs, to overworking, or to perfectionism. Those are all symptoms of having high ego content and high emotional content. But some of the divine treatment you could say for that, in my experience and understanding, are the two different sides of the non-human psychology coming together to attempt to guide that person towards opportunity to change and heal and grow on their earthly journey. And that just keeps coming up time and time again. So in Bedazzled, for example, it follows the story, the main character, played by Brendan Fraser, I think. Was
Yep,
that who played? I knew
it
it.
was.
Yeah, he was pining after a particular woman. He was just madly in love with this lady, and she had shot him down. And so he made a deal with the devil to win her heart. And the devil was putting him through all of these different scenarios until he finally got it that she was never going to be his and that he needed to release her to be happy and for him to go on his own path. And then
Yeah,
in the end, he wound up getting his own, um, you could say twin flame or soulmate, whatever you'd like to call it. And it was only by letting go of that addiction, that yearning, that his person could actually come through for him as the divine blessing. But in the reality, it was a master plan by both sides of the non human psychology to help this beloved soul um, continue to grow. And I think it would be really cool. I don't know if this will ever happen, but I think it would be really cool if maybe some of these divine people came to Earth and tried to integrate in, human society, because what an adventure that would be, kind of flipping the story on the head. You know what I mean? So I don't know, but isn't life fascinating?
It is. And one thing too, you mentioned doing a lot of shadow work, and when I was growing up, I would hear the term shadow work and I would be like, "Oh no." Cuz you had you hear the word shadow and you're like, I don't want to," and you had this connotation that it's either going to be hard work or you're going to be doing a lot of work over a long time, and it's like, you start painting a picture. And when I was working on a presentation for a conference I did in March about the mythos and the power of the hero's journey,
Yeah.
I was able to look at, and bring to light the new shadow work, the new view of it, and that it's not, your dark side and you're having to face, your dark side and, look at this, bad side of yourself. And I would say to people, I now see, the shadow is both, it's the balance of the light and dark. Because if it was dark, you would never see it in the dark. But because you can see it in the dark, that means it has light.
Mhm.
And so they were like, that's a really good point. And I said, yeah. So now let's look at the term shadow work. It's you working on bringing yourself into balance. And in doing this work, you are doing one of the three main phases of the hero's journey.
Yes.
And so you don't have to look at it now as this, oh my God, I'm going to go into this. It's like, oh, cool. What's gonna, come of the other side of this? What's
Mhm.
gonna be the change? Is it gonna be a big change? Is it a small change? Or what? And now when I feel myself needing to go, and do shadow work on myself, I sometimes will take a term from Tron Legacy where I'll go, I'll be back. I need to go knock on heaven, knock on the heavens. And it's like, it's my way of saying, yeah, I'm about to go and do shadow work. And I can do it in an hour, I can do it in a day, I can do it in a second. It doesn't matter the length because I'm no longer scripting it as what it is. I'm scripting it as what's it going to be.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
And so it totally changes the viewpoint of that term into where, if you say to someone, we're going to do shadow work, it's like, I don't want to look at the bad side of myself. But if you go, we're going to do shadow work to see who you're going to become, it's like, hey, that actually sounds interesting. Yeah. Who am I going to become? I'm on board. Let's go do it.
Right.
And so it's a matter of perception.
Yeah, it is. A lot of this is truly subjective, and that's something that trips a lot of people up when I talk to them about this. Um a lot of people with higher ego content and higher emotional content tend to get very upset when it's pointed out that opinion isn't fact. And this is where people kind of get upset with me too, because I say that I could always be wrong. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything, etc., etc. So they think that that's lame and that's boring, and they want concrete answers. And they've already made up their minds a lot of the time based on their own opinions and thinking that opinion is fact. I've had to learn how to balance my language between both worlds. But when working with my non-human companions, everything for the vast most part is very like accuracy and honesty is a main core component of that communication. So they're very contractual. So let's say that you yourself want to work with a non-human person and you say, I wish for $1 million. And you never stipulate how it would be preferred to arrive in your life. You put no conditions on it whatsoever. And so that person looks at your soul, your heart, etc., and they say, "Okay, here's what this person qualifies for based on who they are inside." And let's just say you're not such an honest, accurate person, just generally, you take advantage of other people and whatnot. Um, you might get $1 million, but let's say you're going to be in a terrible accident and you're paralyzed for life and you can't even enjoy it then. But when it comes to someone who they deem as being light as a feather, you might make that same request and tell this non-human person, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do, but I really need this amount of money in order to make everything work. Can you please help me? They'll look at everything and then all of a sudden, who knows, maybe there's a class action lawsuit that you didn't know you were a part of, and then you get a check in the mail harm free. You know what I mean? So there are lots of ways that it could work, but shadow work is always a massive part of making contact with non-human peoples, because the more that you know yourself, know thyself, the more that you give them to work with. If you heal your alcoholism, your codependency, any issues that you might have with physical or mental health, if you treat yourself with love and care and honesty and accuracy, that's most likely to be reflected in the relationships that you are eligible to have with non-human people. So I do hope that all makes perfect sense. And
Yeah.
the more that someone does the self inner work, especially, the more repellent they become to, you could say, the demonic types of peoples. Because I've met many that they are, you could say, energy vampires. And they cannot come around people who live a truly high vibration, high integrity, high love life from the inside out by that non-human person's terms. You know what I mean? So it completely repels them on, you could say, a physical or an energetic level. They literally can't be around it. It's like wearing sage all the time. Does all of that make sense?
It does, and I'll share with you a family story
Yeah.
that we have that kind of goes along with the point of, be, crystal clear what you're asking the universe for. And my dad had put out an affirmation to the universe. He needed a lot of cash.
Ah.
So he wasn't working at the time, and a gentleman reached out to him and offered him this great project. And so he's like, okay. And he was doing a lot of work with this person. He wasn't getting paid a lot, but he was spending a lot of time with this person. What do you think this person's last name
Mm.
was?
Cash.
Cash. So he was
Oh, that's
getting a lot
classic.
of cash,
Oh my
just not the
god.
way he wanted it. And so they were like, so that's where our family, we came up with the joke of, be careful what you ask for, because the universe is going to give it to you one way or another. And if you're not specific,
Yes.
you're not going to get it the way you want it. And
Yes.
that's on you. And you can't fault the universe for that. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah. And it's like, we can't help but laugh at, the unfolding of that, because we're like, that's a truly great lesson right there, because, how many times do we say, I just need money for this or money for that. Well, you're talking to an energy form that has no concept of what money is. So they can be giving you lots of pennies, lots of coins, or lots of, tens, 20s. And they're like, here, you got a lot of money. This is money. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, this isn't, the denomination of money I really needed to help. And it's like, well, you didn't specify how the money looked. So you got a lot of money. You just, again, you got to be specific. And I know it sounds weird to say, if you need $1,000, you even got to say $1,000. You can't say $1,000 because you could end up with a
Yes,
thousand deer outside because
exactly.
they're known as bucks. And so,
Exactly. And they're always hammering that point home with me. Um, one of the biggest gripes that they have with humankind is that human beings don't communicate properly and sometimes don't communicate at all. There's a lot of avoidance there where situations really could just be handled with a heart to heart chat, or just being honest about whatever is going on. But I get it. Like in the human society here, a lot of the time honesty and vulnerability in that way is used as a weapon, or it's just not received well at all. It can result in massive fights, massive arguments, the bruised ego and whatnot. So I understand that. But the thing that I always tell people is that if you're going to work with non-human peoples, you've got to be able to face yourself and to face the truth and to be honest and accurate as much of the time as you possibly can. And if you've got an issue, just talk about it, because chances are these non-human people, the vast majority of them, at least that I'm aware of, they're extremely low in ego content and extremely low in emotional content. So they're typically not going to blow up at someone. They're typically not going to have an issue. They tend to really value the individuals that they work with, and so they're willing to be incredibly flexible in order to promote the relationship, in order to make sure that all parties are happy and following the rules that are equally agreed upon. And I think that that's one area of relational psychology that I wish we could see more in this society here, because the relationship dynamics that, for example, I have with all of my non-human friends and companions are totally different than what I have with the vast majority of human beings. Artemaeus was taught all of this type of psychology, and now he also has his own, relationships with these non-human companions and friends. And he says that he vastly prefers the non-human type of relationship and psychology as compared to the neurotypical human experience. And I couldn't agree with him more. And that's
right.
that's something that I like about you. You're very sweet. You're very easygoing. I don't detect any dishonesty or avoidance in you. We talk about just about anything and everything, and I think that might be part of the reason why they chose you.
And I mean, it even goes as it's kind of funny as sometimes we'll be talking and you'll be like, well, uh, I feel like I need to say this, but I'm not sure if, how you'll take it and everything. And I'm like, what? And you'll say it, and I'll be like, oh, that's this, or that. And it's like, you're like, oh, okay, yeah. So then we start talking more about it. It's like, okay, it's okay. And
Yep.
and I kind of laugh. I'm like, yeah, I'm one of the few, and I'll jokingly sometimes will say to people, I'm one of the few people that, through my life experiences, you could say a lot of things to me and I will not have a shocked look on my face because I'm like, yeah, I've kind of had experience with that, or I know of it, and so yeah, and can talk about it. Or if I don't, somehow I tap into the mind taps into energy that does, and so it's like they'll just channel through me and say, "Yeah, here's what you need to say, here's what you need to do," and it's like, okay, but I mean, it's like, yeah, I know you and I have laughed quite a few times over. This is gonna sound so strange, but this happened, and I'm like, and you're like looking at me, and I'm like, I'm still waiting for the strange part, and you're like, that was the strange part. I'm like, oh, yeah, I
Yeah,
could see, how that could be taken as the strange part. It's like I have to remember to look at what's going on.
yeah, and I love that. I get to chat with you in ways that I don't tend to get to talk with a lot of people here, and it makes me very happy, which is why I continue to work with you. And even I remember you came to me with a problem some months ago, and I gave you my honest advice, and it does usually seem to come from a really exotic perspective. The people who tend to follow what I have to say, they follow my advice. It works for them 9 times out of 10, but it doesn't feel good to the ego. Typically, it doesn't feel good to the emotions.
Yeah,
So, in talking with you, I love that you did take my advice to heart and it helped you really clear things up. And that's what I feel like I'm here on this earth for. I really just want to love and support people from all different walks of life and just kind of plug into people's stories where I can and where I'm welcomed. And it's definitely easier to do that when someone is very chill and they don't get offended by differing points of view or by hearing the type of universal formulas I seem to understand. And that seems to be too like what a lot of my non-human friends look for in connections here in this society. So if someone has faced their fears, if they don't think that all non-human people are out to harm them or eat them or negatively lie to them or whatever, destroy their lives, and they're showing up as honest, loving people, then that human being is probably going to have an awesome experience with the paranormal, typically no matter who they bump into. So
yeah,
that's really the message that I want to get out there, and that's why bringing you on to talk about your experience with the shadow person was important to me because a lot of people have that negative understanding of shadow people, but there are lots of different types of shadow people out here, and a lot of the time it's a very neutral or sometimes even a very positive experience. And you've not had any kind of bad luck or anything of that nature. In fact, you've gotten closer with me. You've gotten closer with Artemaeus and maybe even with my own non-human friends and companions. You're still trucking along doing great. And I think that that's important for the public to see.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm not gonna say my life has been kind of on the upward slope, and
Sure.
just keeps rising. No, there's been some bumps and everything along the road, but I'm the type of person, like, if something's happening, my first thought is, what in my field is bringing this about? What in my, journey am I learning in this moment that it's come forward like this? Okay. And then I look at it and I move on. I don't ever sit there and go, oh, who was I just talking to? And, can I put it on them and pass the buck, so to speak, and be
Uh,
like, it's not me, that's causing this downfall. It's got to be somebody else. And so I don't go and look at who was I just talking to about this or that and going, oh, this is who I can point a finger to. It's like, no, I own my part of it. And so I'll share with you something that I've recently come to terms with is, so I had a family life growing up where it literally was like a civil war was ready to break out at a moment's notice. Sides were drawn, It's like we could go to blows at any second, any moment. And so I was always guarded and always careful who I would talk to, what I would say, who knows who. And then I would, one day and then it put me on this path of learning modalities to heal because I kept thinking I needed to heal the situation as a whole. Well, then I woke up one day and was like, nobody can heal the situation as a whole. We can only heal our parts. That's all I'm responsible for. I'm not responsible for anybody else's parts. And it's like this huge fog was lifted from me. This weight was lifted. It's like my entire life just went from living on edge to living, like free almost, it seemed like. And it's all because I learned in every situation in our lives that we experience, as little as it seems to be the factor, the honest truth of every single moment is what I do in this moment defines this moment. What I do in the next moment defines the next moment. But the moment is just what my part of it. Not, I can't go, over to like Artemaeus and Tilly's house and say, "Oh, Artemaeus, you're struggling with this. So if you were to do this, this, and this, totally, will change how you see this and clear that all up for you. And, you're welcome," and walk away. That's never going to happen because I'm not Artemaeus. I don't
Mhm.
know what Artemaeus is experiencing in this moment
Mhm.
that brought this situation to light. I only know what I'm experiencing and what I'm learning. So therefore, that's where the freedom comes from, is owning your part. That's what life is all about. That's what the journey is all about. Your part. Not, hey, we're responsible for this situation because we're a part of it. That's the key word, a part. We're not the situation. So
Right.
that's where the clarity came from, is the verbiage, realizing what it really meant and going, aha. And my life changed from that moment on. It's like I no longer took on anybody else's role. And so that's, what I want to share with everyone out there, that's watching this is, you know, if you're struggling, through situations, maybe take a step back, take a breath, and go, are you trying to fix the situation as a whole? Or are you trying to fix your part? If you're doing the whole, good luck to you because I couldn't figure it out. And if you can, kudos to you. But I think you'll be miles ahead if you just focused on your part. But, that's totally up to you how you want to look at it. I'm
Mhm.
just offering a suggestion.
Right. And when I was doing my clinical education, this was way back in the day. Um, I was taught that a lot of trauma in the human brain is because the human victim was born with high ego content and high emotional content. And that's perfectly okay. I'm not judging or anything of that nature. I'm simply, explaining the mechanics behind the scenes. But people who have a lot of ego content and emotional content are more prone to having issues with codependency, addiction, and then brain trauma brought on by different types of abuse and whatnot. And that means also it could result in something as serious as a personality disorder that is formed when the child is quite young, or even CPTSD, complex post traumatic stress disorder. And so this relates to the paranormal because the high ego content, the high emotional content, all of that typically results in a person trying to control an entire situation, like a young child, for example, who thinks that their parents are getting divorced because of something that that child did when it has nothing to do with that person at all. But what I've noticed from listening to non human people talk, like my own non-human friends and companions who live with me, visit me often, etc., and then talking with genetic specialists and different types of psychologists that I work with behind the scenes, there's a completely different situation where um, people who are very low in ego content or who don't have any, so for example, my non-human connections, they don't try to control a situation. They own their part so much that um, it can look as though they're trying to control a situation completely outside of themselves, but instead they take so much responsibility for themselves. They're always trying to see where they can improve in order to assist a situation to a healthier outcome further. And the way it's been described to me is that in other different types of societies, the ones that have a population with a lot less ego content and a lot less emotional content, this biological mechanism works brilliantly as a social dynamic. So both parties are coming to the table to be selfless and to be loving just by default. But if you were to drop someone like that into a society like this, that person would either be probably uh, diagnosed with some type of personality disorder, most likely borderline personality disorder, or having complex post traumatic stress disorder. And so, what I'm trying to say, thank you for coming to my TED Talk, is that the social dynamics work completely opposite. Over there, being authentic and sweet and sincere gets you everywhere. But here in this society, um, it's often quite punished and makes things even worse, especially with high ego content, high emotional content people who are used to being extremely dishonest and manipulating. So those are two worlds that really cannot come together. However, when I'm advising people here how to work with non human beings, I always say if your instinct is to lie, if your instinct is to attempt to manipulate, to leave out information, to cut contact, quote unquote, or to try to forcefully cut contact, it's probably going to be in your best interest to do the very opposite. So instead of lying, being, very gently honest and accurate about your experience, your emotions, what it is that you want or need from the situation, and then communicating that clearly. If nothing else, 9.9 times out of 10, that resolves the misunderstanding or the haunting or any ill will, if that makes any kind of sense. So it's part of the shadow work, but it's learning how to integrate with a completely different type of psychology.
That's true. And one of the things, too, that, when we're doing work, one of the things that, and I'll admit, I'm even guilty of it too at times,
Sure.
is we do the work and then like a day or two later it comes up again and you're like, I just did the work on this. Okay, I must have done it wrong, so I'll do it again. And you do the work and it comes up again and you're like, okay, what's going on? Maybe, did I forget to dot an I or cross a T? So you do the work again and it comes up
Yeah.
again. and you finally are like, forget it. I'm not doing the work anymore because it doesn't work because it keeps coming up.
Yeah.
But the problem is we're looking at it in the aspect of when I do the work, it should be one and done. That's not how
Mhm.
it is. It's a layered effect. And so when I have, now when I'm like conscious of it, when something comes up, I'm like, oh, cool. I got to see this pattern rise, and, show itself. And, wow, it only took me 2 minutes to recognize it this time.
Yeah.
And, now, I can, I'm going to work on it, and take care of it, and it may be a year later. It's like, hey, now I got it down to 1 minute and I
Mhm.
recognized it. You got to
Yeah.
start looking at it as, oh, what positives are coming of it up is, and by positives meaning how fast did you recognize it? And remember, in the past, you would go days. So if you're now registering it in 2 days instead of three, that's a huge step.
Huge. Yeah.
And so take the wins. See how quicker you're noticing it. And the other key to it is, and this is especially important if it's like a emotionally charged triggering event to where
Mhm.
you're in a happy mood, it comes up and you're all of a suddenly in the like ready to fight the world, persona versus happy, realizing you have now seen the scenario rise up and you're like, hey, not only did I catch this, faster, but I didn't get charged. I didn't get
Yeah.
triggered. So there's another win. And, look, you got to look at everything that's going on in the situation because shadow work doesn't always show up because it's something to work on. I believe it can also show up to show you the work you've been doing is working.
I agree.
And so that's why we had the free will of, let's say, Tilly said something that triggers me. I can stop and go, you know what? Yeah, that triggered me, but I don't want to work on that right now. And that's totally fine. I don't have to. Just because it came up doesn't mean I have to drop everything and go look at it.
Yeah,
I can
that's
look
true.
at it later and or I can go, hey, Tilly did trigger me, but we still had a great talk. We still, did this and that. So that's a win-win. And maybe there's nothing to look at. And so that's the thing is that I'm trying to make the point of is just because it comes up doesn't mean it's work. It could be coming up for other reasons, and so don't judge the action by past. You got to look at it in the moment and look at where you're at because if you're happy where you're at and you're getting triggered but you're not getting really triggered, you're just noticing it, then you know, I would say to you, enjoy it, live it up, and be happy with that and, go on with your day. Or, if you want to look at it, but you don't have to, in other words.
Yeah, absolutely not. It's never really a requirement. I mean, unless of course, your life is in danger, then I think it would be wise to look at whatever keeps coming up there. But certainly, yeah, free will is a thing to some extent or another. Um, And something else that I've often been told by non-human peoples is that for a lot of them, free will is measured in their ability to be ego flexible. So, Michael, my dear, you're Michael. You've got just yourself. You have a whole integrated ego and personality. But apparently, a lot of non human peoples, because they're so low in that ego content, they actually live life as a kaleidoscope, essentially. So they've got many different facets. And this is part of why, according to what I've been told, a lot of them are known in one civilization as one person, and then across the world at the same time they're showing up as a different person. But at the core of it, they have the same integrated deep inner self with the same morals and the same types of preferences and whatnot, but they project that into completely separate, different egos, different personalities, different even physical manifestations. But that's why you've got all the same exact stories of similar beings all around the world. It's allegedly because it's the same cast, you could say, of handful of non-human peoples who are just projecting a kaleidoscope of different personality and ego levels. Um, Jacques Vallée, Dr. Jacques Vallée wrote about this to some degree. I mean, as much as he possibly could have in some of his books. And so you might want to check that out sometime for those who are listening. Oh,
Yeah.
thank you, Antonio. I appreciate that. I do think I'm pretty.
So I know we've been throwing the term ego around a lot, and
Yeah.
everybody has different definitions. And I'll be honest, the definition I had when I was little
Hmm.
is not the definition I have now. It's
Right.
evolved. And so that's the key too, is even though the ego is considered a core element to us, even core values and core beliefs can be changed. They're not cast in stone. And so, yes, Antonio, we are Americans. But okay, so ego to me, I had a spiritual teacher tell me you look at ego and you break it down to the EGO, and that's how it's spelled. And it's an acronym for Earth Guide Only. It helps you to navigate the Earth realm. So when it's like I learned it and I started, going, okay, yeah, this is going on, this is going on. Well, yeah, this is helping me navigate here, and it is struggling when I go,
Yeah.
say, off world doing work, my spirit. It struggles there
Hmm.
and causes rifts. Well, that's because it's designed for the earth realm. And
Yeah.
so that's where a lot of people started getting the notion, and I was one of them that was like, to move on to your galactic self, you have to destroy the ego because it's
Mm.
earth guide only. And then I was like, one day I was talking with someone and I said, wait a minute, if we think of the ego, the earth guide only, as being a computer program, or a program designed to help us run here, why can't we give it an upgrade and make it a galactic ego that help, and I guess you would call it the GGO, the galactic guide only. And you can take it, upgrade it, and now it can work with you out there. And you have two now, or the one can still operate here. It depends on how you write the program. And somebody was saying, yeah, that's absolutely true. If it is a program, you can control and rewrite the program to do whatever you want it to do. It's there to help you. So that's an important facet to where if you're one of those people that are like, everybody who says you got to kill the ego or destroy the ego, you're wrong. Don't just sit there and say you're wrong. Approach them by saying, hey, what if you upgrade it to the next level? Just like you're being upgraded. And they, more people may sit there and go with you and say, oh my God, you're right. Let's not destroy it. Let's upgrade it. That makes better sense. Yeah, let's do that. That sounds easier. How do we do
Sure.
that? And
Sure.
you've got your point across. They still get their point across. Everybody's happy. But it's the way you bring it and it's the way you present it. And I think the problem when we get into like metaphysical concepts and talking about the quote ascension and everything is nobody knows what it's going to look like, nobody knows how it's going to be, so we're all like vying to say this is the answer, this is the answer. Well, nobody knows the answer, so until we have somebody who actually does it and then comes back and says, hey, this is how I did it, come on, and then more people start doing it and more people start doing it, and then you can say, hey, those people had the answer. Well, until that day comes, and I personally don't think that day is ever going to come where one person has the answer for everybody. It's going to be, oh, well, they did this. Well, what if, I feel like it should be this? Boom, you do it. You do it your way. You take what they did, make it yours. That's what it's all about.
Sure. So when I say ego, I'm talking about the clinical definition, which is to say, essentially, um, the story, the inner story that someone automatically tells themselves about themselves and about the world around them, etc., etc. The ego runs on stories, and that's why human beings love stories. It's relatable, and that's how most human beings learn. That's why there's a saying that the wise man learns from other people's experiences. But the higher you are in ego content, the stronger the story is within yourself, and the more you tend to have to actually follow something all the way through and experience the risks and the consequences for yourself, because that story is so locked deeply within oneself. That's just the layman's terminology. I don't have the modern, up-to-date clinical terminology memorized, but there you go. Maybe on the next stream or something, I can pull it up and we can do a show about that as it relates to the paranormal and to the shadow work. But hopefully that gives everyone an idea more of where I'm coming from. So for more of an example, apparently non-human people and people with very low ego content, me included here, because my brain waves are measured to have very few beta brainwaves. Now, beta brainwaves, those are directly reflective of the amount of ego content that a person has. I work with a lot of specialists these days who image the brain and the brain waves, etc. And this is what they keep coming back to. This was something also that we explored more of with scientists in January at the Cosmic Contact Conference. And we were able to get comparative brain readings from myself and my dear husband, Artemaeus. His showed a ton of active beta brain waves, and mine showed only the slightest blip of them when I was trying really hard to communicate my inner experience to an ego based person who couldn't understand what I was talking about. That stressed me out, and that bumped up, that actually brought me into a slight beta experience, which, I was feeling anxious at the time. I actually started to have a bit of a story running in my head. That is about the only time I've ever really had a lot of beta brainwave activity, and therefore a lot of ego content, is when I'm extremely stressed. But other than that, I tend to be very curious, very open-minded, very just cooperative. And this relates to how a lot of certain types of non-human people are, especially the ones that live with me. They have either no ego content or very little ego content. And so we can talk about anything and everything. We can cooperate on almost anything under the sun or moon, and it's not an issue at all. But the more ego content someone has, clinically speaking, the more trapped in their own story, or you could even say immersed in their own story that they are, and the less pro-social they tend to be. Which isn't to say that necessarily, they're evil or anything like that. They're psychological and biological differences that I think are crucial to talk about. And going back to the shadow people, I think that's a large part of why that person chose to show him, her, or itself to you, Michael, because you're typically very sweet. You're typically very easygoing and open-minded. And I've only ever seen you really get upset once about something. You know what I mean? And we talked about it in private. It had nothing to do with me, but I can
Right.
see why you were upset. You know what I mean? You don't just fly off the handle.
Right. And another example too of what we're kind of talking about is that I've kind of morphed and kind of taken it another direction is I'm sure a lot of people in the audience and you, Tilly, as well, have heard the adage of the Native Americans where they're like, you have two wolves living in you.
Yes. Yes.
You have one that's really the dark and the fighter wolf, and you have the good protector wolf. And when they ask, who are you going to be? The answer is, which one do you feed? Well, I took it a step further in my awareness, and I was like, we have two wolves living, in us. We're feeding both of them because there are situations where you're going to step into a situation where you're like, hey, fighter wolf, I need you right now. I need you to come forward and you're gonna and come, do what you do. And then when a second it's done, balance back out and protector wolf, you come out and, do your thing and then we're done. Pull
Mhm.
back and both of you are back to living next to each other inside of me, calmly and peacefully
Yeah.
until you're needed. But it's that reality is, that I added to it is we need both. You can't just feed the one
Yeah.
and not the other because, yeah, if you choose to be the good person, well, if you're not careful, you're going to become a doormat and people are going to walk all over you and you're going to say, but I'm the good person.
Right.
Well, how's that serving you? Because, from what I can see, you are the good person, but your life isn't showing yourself as a good person. It's showing yourself as, you have nothing really in the world because you just give it away because you're like, oh, such the nice person. You don't have that other element balancing it and standing up for yourself. And so
Yeah.
that's the key is you need both operating copacetically, kind of collaborating and, working together. And that's the part I think that never got translated through in the message. And I feel like, honestly, I kind of feel like if we went back to the original story, it probably had that element, but somewhere along the line, somebody was like, I'm just going to use this story to make this point, so he'll stop doing this and behave better,
Yeah.
and just stopped the story. And it was like, oh, and then that's what the story became.
Yeah, I think you might be onto something there, and that goes into what a lot of my non-human friends and companions have taught me, which is that Earth is the place of illusion, delusion, and opposite. And um, if you, in a non-religious way, if you believe, for example, that someone like Jesus came here who loved all of humanity and just really wanted better for them and was, killed for being so loving, if you believe that, um, they told me that it's the same thing here, that um, you can't you can't come to Earth and be that way and survive. You always have to develop some type of quote unquote negative ego in order to make it here, because all of the pro-social ways that exist elsewhere in other societies, you could say higher vibration societies, it doesn't work like that here by design. And that doesn't make it evil or necessarily awful here. Earth is a place of extreme personal differentiation. It's a place of extreme personal growth. And it's where you come, apparently, if you really want to prove your mettle. You know what I mean? If
Right.
you really want to show your guts and that you can handle all colors of the rainbow and not just the love and the light stuff. Um, it's still
It's
something that I'm working on, but it does seem to be true what these non-human people have taught me. And again, this includes the so-called demons, the angels, the demons, the fairies. Everyone has had the same type of message for me, and it all seems to be quite true. And it seems too like now people are more waking up to the so-called dark spirituality, that this place is not just all love and light, but now our society is faced with a new challenge. How then do we handle these conundrums in a healthy, mature, safe manner, you know?
right. It's like we're in the crucible. We're being
Mhm.
forged, but it used to be, the expression in the old days was, you were forged in battle, or you were
Yeah.
forged in experience, or you were forged in this or forged in that. Well, today's terms, it's, we're still being forged. It's just a
Mhm.
matter of where are you putting, your experiences. Like I could say, I was forged through battle, even though I never actually went to battle. I've experienced, almost, I could say probably, almost as bad as, being in physical combat, but I'm not going, to, say, oh, we need to compare. No, that's not what I'm meaning. I'm just saying, everybody's experiences are so different that you can't, we don't judge each other. That's the forging, is you are doing yourself, and I'm doing myself. We're interacting, and that's forging us in our interaction. But we don't need to, go to the swords and axes and guns to, prove who's stronger, who's better.
Mhm.
The actuality is, when, to me, is when two opposing viewpoints clash and meet face to face and actually leave the ground talking with an understanding of each other. That's the true battle, and that battle has been
Mhm.
won. But if you leave and both sides are like, oh, they're still doing this to us, and we can never trust them because of this and that. It's like, yeah, you guys kind of missed the boat, and you're gonna see each other again because you didn't see and learn everything you needed to, in my opinion. And that's why it continues, is because somebody inevitably will go, well, but the way they're acting, in the past, I can't do this or that. Well,
Sure.
that's the problem. You're judging it on the past. The person in charge of the country probably is not the same person who was in charge of the country back then. So chances are that writ, whatever caused the problem, is not a problem anymore. It's gone on and has been unresolved. And so therefore it's going to keep coming around until it is
Sure.
resolved.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And this is why in my new book, Enchanted Objects, when I talk about resolving issues with enchanted objects, I say that I never recommend charming any object and then using it to stop, for example, some non-human being from entering your space or your life, or to stop any human curses or anything of that nature. So because if you use an enchanted object as a barrier, all you're doing is freezing the relationship that is bothering you. So in my opinion, it's much healthier and usually results in much better outcomes for everyone if the person in question faces it head on and just works through it. That's always been my experience anyway in life, whether it's been a human relationship, a non-human relationship, or anything in between. Freezing it doesn't work, and then insisting that there's still an issue. Typically, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like holding the grudges and whatnot.
It
It doesn't work, in my opinion.
is. Yeah, it's like what I would say for guys is we bury our emotions because that's what we've been taught to do.
Hmm.
And once the container, within us gets full,
Yeah,
your partner or a friend can come up to you and say something and you just blow.
yeah.
And it all gets released. And you're like, what just happened? Well, your container reached its maximum. You couldn't stuff anymore. So it's the volcano. It blew up. And it's where the expression, your emotions came out sideways. It's like it's not how they were supposed to come out. Well, it's the only option they had. You had no room left, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the
Sure.
body just let it out. And unfortunately, that person is going to be the brunt that takes it. And it's like, and I'm guilty of it still a little bit. And when it happens, I go up to the person that I blew up to and I just say, hey, look, I'm really sorry that, you didn't deserve for me to blow up like that. And I shouldn't have blown up like that. It's just you happened to be the catalyst that overflowed what was inside of me and just emptied everything. And so I'm truly sorry. Didn't mean for that to happen. It's
Mm-hmm.
just this comment that you made just put me over the threshold of what I could hold. And so I'm
Sure.
sorry it came out that way,
Sure.
but this is why. And, you know, I'll work on, not having that happen again. And that person, if they're the true friend that they are, will say, hey, yeah, I kind of knew you were in that boat and I could have said it in a better way or, reacted in a better way. But yeah, I accept your apology if you accept mine. And we hashed it out and we're cool. And this can take place in a matter of half an hour. And I was joking with my friend last night on the show because women will say to guys, you need to work on your emotions. Well, we work on our emotions differently than women do. And so in that
Mhm.
half hour, we processed everything. But then women go, oh, well, what do you mean, this and that? And they want to, evaluate it. Oh, how
Mhm.
did this get? And we're like, you realize you're making us bring it back up.
Sure.
That's not cool. And so I was saying to her, it's great that, women are, getting together and working on bringing their voice back. But it's a little unfair when the women say to the guys, you need to, understand where I'm coming from and understand how I'm looking at it. And I said, but here's the caveat to that statement. Where can guys go to see that and learn that? There isn't anywhere right now, really. And so it's like that's where I think relationships clash is yeah, women have a place to go to share what women do.
Mhm.
Guys have a place to go where guys do what they do. The guys and girls don't get together and say, hey, this is how we hash, this is how we communicate.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
let's
true.
learn both. So it's like, yeah, that's the problem. Everybody works with their own and expects the other person to magically understand
Sure.
how this works. And it's like, and she was like, yeah, you raise a great point. There is nowhere where both sides talk through something, and unless you go to like clinical therapy, which even
Yeah.
that I think is like, eh, that's not what I'm looking at. And so that's and so that's something just keep in mind, if you're a guy who's having trouble relating with your alternate partner, remember she doesn't know how you think and how you operate because there's nowhere for her to learn it. And vice versa for the ladies. There's
Yeah.
nowhere for your opposite to go, oh, since I took this course on, understanding this, I get where you're coming from now. Yeah, we don't have those courses.
Mhm. That's true, yeah, and for me, it took years for me to understand where Artemaeus was coming from because our brain states are incredibly different and unique as compared to each other. But working with a lot of the specialists that I do now, I'm finally getting to learn everything I've ever wanted to know about how ego-based people think and feel and speak and whatnot, stuff that regular therapy just isn't going to cover. You know what I mean? And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful for that. But I agree that there's always a divide too when it comes to the sexes because a lot of the time, thinking patterns and stuff like that, they are um, a lot of the time they're inborn. It's a genetic type of difference. So therefore it's hard to, I think, cross those lines in the sand for other people unless you really do have someone that you can talk to about that. And I do hope that in the future we'll be able to foster more conversations like this between, of course, different type of species about different with different types of sexes. It really just depends, but I
Yeah.
think it's important if we're going to learn and grow in the society. Now, I know that I had mentioned bringing on, or I'm sorry, bringing up some other stories. Since you had told yours, I thought maybe some of the listeners might like to hear a few other experiences that people have reported back to me on. Do you mind?
Oh, please share. And yeah, and just, I mean, this is the Tilly show, so
Yeah, okay, very cool. So I am an author, and I've never really been blessed with the ability to draw. So I've been learning, of course, over the last year, but I have had the honor and the pleasure of working with a fabulous artist. Her name is Faye Peahen. I absolutely adore her. She helped me to illustrate the first Tales from the Rift book. And as many of you may or may not know, I have had my own health journey. I have porphyria, so I'm definitely allergic to the sunlight. I've gotten onto a new treatment. I've gotten into specialists. I'm doing far better now. But during the time of getting this book ready for publishing, I really was not doing well in a few different ways. And my dear illustrator was just an absolute gem, a true angel during this time. And there was one particular morning where I woke up when she and I hadn't been talking for a while just because of my health issues and whatnot. And I just really felt the urge that I needed to message her and check up on her and let her know, like, hey, I haven't forgotten about you. We're still working on the project, etc., etc. And I messaged her, emailed her, and she got back to me shortly after. And she said that it would have been at exactly the same time that I was thinking about her and thinking of contacting her. And that entire hour, right before I sent the email, she said that there was something very clearly going on in her bathroom behind the closed bathroom door. And it had only begun right around the time I woke up and I was thinking about her, and it stopped a few moments after I had sent her that email. So she said that she physically heard, her and her spouse physically heard someone in the bathroom rummaging around, looking, probably shuffling through the things on the countertop. I can't remember. I think she said that someone had turned on the water or had been messing with the toilet or the shower, but she said it didn't feel threatening or anything of that nature. She said, if I remember her email properly, she said it just sounded like someone being curious, like someone being nosy. And that's a thing that I've had happen with a lot of people. Like my companions may go to check up on someone. Sometimes they'll report back to me, sometimes not. I don't have any control over that. I'm not asking any of my friends to go spy on anyone. It's just something that happens because my companions do tend to be nosy. And another time, this was actually pretty recent too. If you guys know about Outer Limits magazine, I am a columnist for Outer Limits magazine. My friend Chris Evers, he runs that publication. Fabulous dude. I really adore this guy. And he has asked me to write for every issue. And I had sent him a whole bunch of articles. And I forget when this was. This was a few months ago. He was working on putting an ad into the magazine for me for one of my books or for my website. I can't quite recall. But he said that very specifically and strangely, during the time that he was working on integrating my ad into that month's issue, that a fan slash air purifier nearby him turned itself on and began to operate itself out of nowhere. And he said that this, if I'm remembering properly, he said that this thing can only be operated via remote control, and the remote control was on the other side of the room. He said that this has never happened before. He's never seen this kind of machine do that before. And it only happened when he started working on putting my ad into the issue, which I found very curious because he was fulfilling a deal that he and I had made. He was honoring his part of the bargain that we had struck, which of course that always touches my heart when people keep their word with me because it's pretty rare here in my experience. So he came back, he immediately reported it to me. He sent me a picture and we chatted about it a little bit. I got his permission. I put it up online as a post on Facebook. I tagged him on it and we talked a little bit about that. So, people could interact with that. But that's another good example of things that happen. Sometimes my friends and companions, they go visit other people, especially at key moments. There are some really nice positive stories that I get. Sometimes there's some really negative ones, and then other times it's just a funny story. But those are two ones that come to mind. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I find it interesting, like, you know, the fan, for example, the purifier that, they would be, messing with that, over, something else. It's like, why would they mess with that? But when you look and you sit back and you look at this, the overall situation, it's like, well, maybe that's the only device that was near them at the time that, they're like, hey, we want you to know we're, here and
Mhm.
we're with this person. And so they're like, hey, if we flicker the
Yeah.
lights, he may be like, that could be a loose wire somewhere. Or,
Yeah.
oh, if, the pencil rolled off. Well, did I bump the table? I must have. You'll explain it
Yeah.
away. A device where the remote is on the other side of the room, that you can't explain away really easily. And so it's like,
Mhm.
that's a moment where I feel like they really wanted their presence known and to be known attached to what he was working on because in all honesty, they could have waited till he was working on somebody else and done it.
Yeah.
And then, he'd be like, hey, does this ever happen to you? And it's like he'd be going to the wrong person. And so
Right.
there'd be no validation to it. And he, it'd always make him question it. And you may be sitting there going, hey, were you working on my stuff around this time? Maybe it was my people. And
Mhm.
he and be like, oh, and be able to get the answer then. But
Yeah.
this way it saved all of that time and he knew to go to you direct. And so that I always find interesting, that they're making themselves known in such a way that rational mind can't explain it away. And, I always love when the curiosity angle comes around and, how she's like, you know, somebody's rummaging in a bathroom of all places. I'm not so sure if I heard someone rummaging through a room in my house that I would not be calling, the authorities because I'm like, somebody is in my
Mhm.
house that's not supposed to be in my house. I don't know
Right.
what conditions, they're in. I need to think of my safety. And so I would rather look stupid for calling them over, a raccoon or something, or, an
Yeah.
animal got in theirs maybe, versus, if someone that meant harm because of the condition they were in, it's like, oh, that it's too late once they open the door and, that's that. But I also, though, look at it in the aspect of because they kept calm, it's like that spirit or whoever was in there was eluding the energy of we mean no harm because they overrode their sense of survival because like I said, your first reaction is call
Mhm.
911, someone's in the house. Not, hey, let's go check it out. Let's, give them time and, see what
Mhm.
they want and everything. It's like that's not normal. So
Yeah.
something altered the energy of the room to where they were like, okay. And so, and then you called. And so they're like, hey, we're able to get answers and, resolve the scenario.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, that's the thing too, that's interesting about her story is the energy around the situation was altered, which is what makes it paranormal, because paranormal is something that's unexplained, and nothing can unexplain how you're hearing somebody in your house and you go, okay, someone's in the house. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, I agree, and that's something that pops up a lot in many different types of non-human encounter stories, especially when it comes to the Fae and even some types of angelic or demonic encounters that the person doesn't panic the way that they normally would. And my dear illustrator, she's, I think anyways, a total sweetheart, and she doesn't really seem to panic very often at all. She said that after about the hour was up, she and her spouse just went and opened the door because they were really curious about what the heck was going on in there. And of course, they didn't find anything. And they said that nothing escalated after that. It was an odd, interesting experience. And then it seems like everyone just went about their way and their day. And that's usually how it goes, living with these types of friends and companions in the house. You might see, a shadow person walk into a wall, or a mist absorb into an object or go through a door, something of that nature. Or you'll be in one room and you'll hear the rustling around what sounds like the other person in another room, only to find out that the other person is actually in the bathroom or up in bed, and there's no explanation for why the cupboards are opening, that kind of thing. But it's never anything malicious, at least not towards me. Towards Artemaeus, for a few years, for like towards the end of 2023, roughly until the end of 2025, he had it really rough with my friends and the people on the other side of the veil who love me. So they were treating me well. You know what I mean? Like, they would leave me little apports around the house. I'd be able to see and chat with these people, due to my different eye structure, my different ear structure, etc. But Artemaeus was having horrible encounters with them. They were tormenting him essentially. There were mimics that would pop up in his face. He would hear what sounded like me calling to him, things like that. He had the mirror entity experience that he talks about sometimes, and then there were other issues too. And they just made his life a living hell. But now that everything has settled down, now that he's gotten his divine discipline and gotten himself under control. He's gotten that divine spanking. He's fine now, and everyone here gets along very well, very nicely. But the activity still is ongoing almost every day. The mists. Sometimes you'll hear someone talking in another room. Sometimes they're talking to you. Sometimes you'll just hear, a discarnate conversation, commentary on the decor. Sometimes that's something that I hear often from other parts of the house, especially as Artemaeus has really gotten into decorating more and gardening. Sometimes they're not even talking to me, but I'll hear them chatter amongst themselves, just commentating about how Artemaeus has really developed as an interior designer and a decorator, and they'll praise him these days for things that he's doing. Or I'll hear them gossiping randomly about other things, or you know, um, sometimes I can hear like faucets turn on in the kitchen or in the bathroom, and then they'll turn themselves off. It's never anything disrespectful. It's just an inhabited house, and I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. For whatever reason, these this phenomenon has always followed me, no matter what house I've lived in, no matter who I've been around, and the paranormal is contagious. Um, it's just, it depends on the people involved, what type of experiences someone's going to have. But I love it, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Right. And one thing too that, maybe in my favor of, the interactions is I've always had dogs around me, and I'm gonna make a statement, for dogs over cats, and I don't mean it as in cats, aren't worth having around. No, I'm just saying in the demeanor in this moment, dogs are easier to translate this than cats, and that is, having, little dogs around the house. Normally there's two. One will, start, rolling around, or, like running in circles, and playing a little bit, and then stops and looks up. And my first reaction when I see this is I'm like, who's there? It's like I know
Mhm.
something got his attention. Or
Mhm.
the other one may be asleep and he gets up and he's sitting staring off in
Yeah.
a direction that's not my direction. I'm like, who you looking at? Who's here? And it's like I automatically know they're seeing something or someone. And so I'm like, okay, who's here? Versus, cats, they do whatever they want whenever they want. So you can't really say, oh, this cat all of a sudden, started looking off somewhere. It's like, well, yeah, that's what cats do. And so I can't guarantee you that that's somebody there. But
Sure.
dogs don't just, wake up and go and stare at a wall. It's like that's not a dog's normal activity. So
Yeah.
that means something has caught their attention. So
Mhm.
that's why I say, having dogs always around, I know if I don't feel someone being there, somebody is there because of the dogs.
Yeah.
And so that, and the fact that I acknowledge they're seeing someone, I almost wonder if, your guys that they're coming around, maybe at that time masking their energy are like, oh, he still knows we're around because he knows and is aware of the animals and their reaction to us. So he's in tune through them. So okay, yeah, he knows we're around. Don't know
Sure.
where, but I know they're there. And so it's
Sure.
like, oh, it's another way that he's more in tune to the environment than other people may be, just because I noticed something and interpret it that way. It doesn't mean I, through all my work, I'm like, oh, normal people are here. I'm over here because of my awareness. No, it could mean actually like more like this, just slightly up on the scale, but it doesn't make me better or worse than anyone. It just shows if I can be aware, so can you. You just have to look and notice things and not
Sure.
just look and go, oh, hey, the dog's looking at the wall again. Maybe we need to take him to the vet and get something checked. It's like there's something wrong with him. It's
Yeah.
like, no, it's probably not anything wrong with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's funny, I have a cat, Bonbon, and she sees stuff pretty frequently around the house, and she's like, "Eh, anymore." She doesn't care very much. But there was one night in particular where I was putting her out on her little catio. That's where she sleeps at night. She has a whole porch to herself. She's absolutely spoiled. And on one of the doorknobs, I have this little toy that has a rope that wags back and forth for her to jump and chase and all of that good stuff. And I hadn't used this toy with her in a while because she just didn't seem to be very interested in it anymore. But when I went out there to feed her dinner the one night, I noticed that she sat on a cat tree right in front of this toy near the doorknob. And she was just staring at it, staring at it, staring at it. And I couldn't figure out what she was staring at because I just was so unaccustomed to this toy being used anymore, especially because you got to like wind it up and whatnot. And I hadn't done it in months. And then it scared the pee out of me because it started vibrating against the door and the tail started going back and forth. I was like, oh, that's what it is. So someone had to have wound this thing up mechanically in order for it to work. So someone was there and playing with her. I was like, all right, guys, I don't even know who you are, but whatever, just have fun, be safe, all of that. So yeah, cats definitely they're strange in some ways, staring off into the ether through a wall, but sometimes, yeah, sometimes the cats, I do think that they're onto something. And
Yeah.
on that, my friends, my battery is down to 9%, and I must say I do for now.
Yeah, my little ones are saying it's dinner time, and so he's been pawing at me for the last half hour, like, "Hey, hey, you know, did you forget about us?" And I'm like,
Uh-oh.
and he'll start barking at me if I don't get the food down fast enough, and I'm like, "You are not starving for food. You have never missed a meal. You don't ever bark at me for your food because your food comes. It's not a
Mhm.
situation of, oh, it's been 4 days. Sorry, I forgot to feed you. It's like, nope, you get your 2 meals a day.
Yeah, they always act like they're starving. But everyone, it has been wonderful to have you here. If anyone's interested, I did launch a new subscription service and a new website. You can find those at intermediary.art. I'm working on an interactive new website redesign that's going to be up here very soon. It's just that with Artemaeus's family medical health issues. We've got several family members who are, it does seem to be preparing to pass beyond the great veil themselves. So we've been in and out of town. We've been um, working with family pretty closely to prepare for what's been going on here. And I've put out a lot of writing since you guys have seen me last on YouTube, since my health is doing so very much better. You're going to want to check me out on Facebook, Tilly Treadwell. I have the only official verified Tilly Treadwell account. If you see any other accounts, those are fake news and they're trying to scam you, so please don't fall for it. You can catch my writing in Outer Limits magazine and in Eerie Expeditions magazine, as well as my new blog, How I Met Your Monster. And if you want books, I have a few series going. There is the Cat New series. So the Cat New Tarot is out. The Cat New Fairies is coming later this month. And then I have The Persistence of Ghosts that was written with me and Tim Swartz and all the team at Zontar Press. And then I just released this month Tilly Treadwell's Enchanted Objects. I have a lot more coming for you. I hope that you'll join me on this weird walk home. Michael, thank you so much for having me. I can hang out with you for a moment after we're done here if you like. But to
All
everyone
right.
else, we love you. Merry morning or magical midnight. Bye.
Yes. And have a great adventure, everyone.